Okay, so let's start the meeting here. I see we have a number. First thing I want to address here is that we've stated here this is primarily about the situation here in the U.S. When we talk about closing the gaps, we have a situation here that pertains to developed countries where we have communities, particularly impoverished communities or minority communities within developed countries that are their educational outcomes are horrible in comparison to the outcomes of the better off. Our philosophy, our overall philosophy is, and this is actually taken from in Japan, what they do with the education there, is they always focus on the bottom 20%, maybe 20%, 30%. I don't know exactly what percent, but their philosophy is if you keep raising up the bottom, you're raising up the average. And by raising up the bottom here, you're closing the gap between the bottom and the top. So here in the United States, we have gifted and talented programs. We hold competitions where we take the best students and we work with them to be even better. But all that does is promote the gap between those that are not achieving the desired educational outcomes and those that are achieving the best outcomes. So the philosophy that we have really is, let's find ways to raise the bottom. Now that it pertains to whether we're talking about developing countries, closing the gap between developing countries and developed countries. And it pertains to countries even like the United States, where we've got roughly a third of the students in the United States who are not achieving an education that would enable them to really become contributing members of society. But there's a key difference. If I go and say we want to take the bottom 20% in a country like the United States and raise them, the difference in the supply side and the availability of education to the bottom 20% in the United States, or when we take a look and say, why are the results not there? It's generally not because the resources aren't there. It's because of the home situation, the societal situation that results in the mindset for learning not being there so much. And so to take on that bottom 20%, the things you have to do focus most on motivation. If I go here to countries in sub-Saharan Africa, if we go in, look in the rural areas of South Asia, you have, or the rural areas in South America, the problem is generally that the resources are not there, that the access and availability is not there. It's less a question of motivation. Now, having said that, I have heard from many of you, speaking especially from sub-Saharan Africa, talking about the problem that the motivation is a significant problem, especially as you get up into secondary school, and the causes for that are not so much that people are just saying, learning's not important, but that a lot of other things, because of the poverty situation, demands time. The competition to do other things is high. Bottom line here is that the kind of solutions that I believe you need in rural DR Congo or in Mali or places like that, the things that you have to do to close the education gap are quite different from what you need to close the education gap in developed countries like the United States or most European countries. So this, right now, the immediate project we're looking at is focused on how do we close the education gap in the United States and developed countries. That's the immediate focus, that we put together a project like that we can use as an example. So I just want to get that out of the way. I think here, those of you from other parts of the world, I think there are some aspects of what we want to do that will apply there. And of course, we want your brain cells and brain power working here on the solutions just as much. But I just want to make it clear that the project and situations that we would be discussing right now for this pilot are focused primarily on the problems here in the United States. Any comments or questions about this philosophy of aiming at raising the bottom 20%, with the project's called Close the Gap, but this concept of saying, let's keep our focus on the how we close that gap between the bottom fifth and the top fifth. And if we can do that continually, then we get to a point where everybody has an equal opportunity. And the reason I mention that so bad, I've written in the papers there about, if we take a city like Camden, New Jersey, or Trenton, New Jersey, or there's actually 18 or 19 communities in New Jersey, those just happen to be the bigger cities. We see here that there's not a single child, not a single child in Camden, New Jersey, that attends a public elementary school, public primary school, that is not in the bottom 5% of elementary schools in New Jersey. And as a result, the likelihood of those children getting a successful education is minimal at best. And in fact, statistically, 1 out of every 3 males attending a public elementary school in Camden, New Jersey, when they start first grade, they're 6 years old, but statistically, the odds are they're going to spend 1/3 of those children are going to spend a year in prison before they're 30 years old. And we know a year in prison costs about the same as it costs to send a child to an Ivy League or a top university for a year. So that's, from a societal perspective, that is not a very good investment. So first thing here, any comments about this idea of focusing on the bottom 20% to close the gap, and the idea that we're focused here for this particular initiative right now on the United States? Any comments, please?
I have a question. Oh, Leah, go ahead.
Go.
Okay. So I was like talking to my.
Whoops, you're muted again, Sean.
Oh, sorry. I was talking to my dad about this because he grew up in Camden and Elizabeth, and he was telling me that it definitely creates a sort of cycle, because the kids now, the same thing happened to their parents, and that the problems at home that are making education not a lot of a priority are going to be there. And we definitely agree with the fact that there has to be a motivation on their level. But how do you suggest, I was reading through the solution papers that you provided, how do you suggest supplying that sort of motivation to make it a priority?
That's what we're going to be discussing and we're going to be talking about. And there are ways and there are examples where people are overcoming that. But the bottom line is here that there's very big efforts that have been ongoing, a huge one going on in Trenton, for example, that takes a holistic approach that says we have to treat the whole family. The problem is that while they have successes, it's prohibitively involved and expensive and to treat everybody in those cities, and to make that problem of education dependent on solving the problem of the family, that's itself an issue. So the question really becomes, how do we achieve the education issue without necessarily having to solve all the other problems that might be out there? But we have to keep it in mind for sure. So we will get into that discussion on how we do that in a minute. Leah, you wanted to say something, then Tala, I see you have your hand up, and we'll we'll take you, Leah, next, and then Tala.
Yeah, this wasn't very much of a comment, it was more of a question. Is there any other goal that we are focusing on, or more focused, sorry, narrower goal that we have besides just trying to increase the average, improve the average? Is there any other goal or more specific?
Well, keep in mind, we have a lot of initiatives, but this particular initiative, Close the Gap, is about closing the gap. So yeah, there are other projects, and obviously, you know, we could come up with other projects. So we have the Read for a Better World, which is focused also on primary school students and the like, but that has a different dynamic that impacts what kind of solutions you might do involved around that. We have other projects that are aimed at secondary students, like the Dare to Be Great or the International Debate competition, or others. But this particular project is about how do we close the educational outcome gap. Not what we're putting in necessarily, but how do we make it so that every child, regardless of what situation they're born into or where they're born into, reaches maturity or adulthood, if you would, with equal opportunities.
Yeah, what I was asking was, in the end, once the initiative happens, in terms of what do you want to achieve, is there anything else, I don't know, using the momentum, or what comes after it, you know?
Well, I think here, this particular one here, because this is a pretty big thing. Nobody in the United States, there's been hundreds of billions of dollars spent to try to close the education gap, to try to deal with the communities that are having problems, and none of them have succeeded. There are a few insular solutions out there that people have done. But in a previous life, about, I guess it's almost 30 years ago now, I spent 3 years traveling around the United States, talking to teachers, trying to understand the causes behind these problems. And almost every single school I visited had some kind of a pilot going on, and they were saying, "Oh, we're solving all the problems." But here we are 30 years later, and the problem is worse today than it was then. So I think right now it may behoove us to focus on saying, let's figure out how we close the academic gap. We have to remember there's also, when you're looking at education, there's a socialization factor that plays a role there as well. That's maybe a little bit of a different aspect. One thing that might fit a little bit your answer is on education. Well, we look to close the gap on cognitive education skills like math and science and so forth. There's getting people to be independent learners, taking responsibility for their own education, and recognizing that education is now lifelong. You're not going to go and get your education and say, I graduated, I'm done, my head's full, and I don't need to go and put anything more in it for the rest of my life. So we have to get people beyond that mindset. And the age that we're targeting here, around 10 years old or so, plus minus a couple of years, that is the age where at the latest, young people have to start recognizing that it's their education and they're responsible, which we see in some of the successful countries. That's what exactly they've done, places like Finland. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an answer. But again, those kinds of discussions here, when we're in discussion and talking about it, all of you need to feel free. Get those questions, those suggestions, those ideas on the table so we can discuss them, and you don't go away saying with the question still in your head, or being dissatisfied that you're thinking maybe we should be doing something slightly different, but it wasn't brought up. If it wasn't brought up, make sure it's not because you didn't try to bring it up. Tala, your question, please, or comment.
Yeah. First of all, I need to ask you, do we have specific reasons that these people do not uh, go to jail at a young age, or do we have specific reasons why they think that education is not that important, or it's just something that it passes by generations, or
There's
it's
a lot of
something?
there's a lot of studies on that, and you can go to England, you can go to Germany, France. You find the same things here if you go into impoverished communities where people don't have a lot of faith that getting an education is going to help them succeed. And a lot of times it's because what they think is an adequate education is much different than what a child from a wealthy community thinks is an adequate education. Um, there's there's also the fact that children growing up in an impoverished communities. There's a study. It was financed by Bloomberg Foundation, the past mayor of New York, in Providence, Rhode Island. The project is called Providence Talks, and you can look that up. What they did is they took babies and they put microphones on babies to record all the words that babies heard in their first 3 or 4 years of their life. And what they found by age 3, the number of different words that a child from a welfare or working class family heard versus a middle or upper class child was day and night, was phenomenal. And the net result of all that, by a time a child from a welfare and working class family starts first grade at age 6, they are 2 years behind in mental maturity. And yet the school system says, okay, everybody, it's first grade, you've all got to do this. So our education systems around the world until now have been pretty much one size fits all. And the teacher is got very limited leeway in what they're allowed to teach on any given day. They've got a rule book that says, if it's Monday, you teach this, and if it's Tuesday, you teach that, and if it's Wednesday, you teach that. And if there's some students that aren't keeping up, well, sort of tough luck. As long as we can get them that they sort of understand 60, 70% of what we're talking about, hey, we can let them go on to the next level. And you one of the videos that is posted there from Salman Khan from Khan Academy, talking about mastery, and gives the example. Imagine we built houses like that and we said, oh, you know, the foundation, well, okay, it's 70%. Okay, go ahead and build the first floor. And if every floor along the way is 70% okay, you know, you can sort of calculate when does the thing fall together. And so when a child here, when I did my studies and I spoke to the better part of 1,000 educators, what we saw was up until around 4th grade, children everywhere have a fair degree of respect for the teacher, and the praise of the teacher means something to them. They go home for summer vacation at the end of 4th grade, and they come back and all they want to do is show how tough they are. Basically, that's the age when the gangs start to get interested in kids. And so the streets typically get them. And it doesn't happen to every child. But if you've got a school that has majority of children from that kind of a background, it only takes a certain percentage of the kids in a school to think that way. And it makes striving for a better education on the part of other students almost impossible. And then what you see is you see parents who care try to pull their kids out of those environments and get them elsewhere, which only really leaves those schools even more in the influence of the negative elements, if you would. So there's a lot of reasons why that's there. What we saw is if we can find a way so that a child at the end of 4th grade feels that they're on a path that can have a future for them, they're usually more resistant to the streets and the gangs because they're preoccupied with being successful. But if a child has only heard you're wrong, you failed, that's not right, through all the way through 4th grade, and they feel they have no chance and they're not going to succeed, that's when they tend to give up on that path and they become more susceptible to gangs. Yes,
Can
Simon.
I ask?
Yes, tell him.
Okay, based on that, part of the solution, I think part of the solution is that we need to outreach the parents and the schools, because I think, in my opinion, the problem starts from their based on their mind and how they think and what they believe in, and this is we need to find solution for this problem first, and then to help them to proceed their education and offer them a good and proper future.
Yeah, as I mentioned, that's sort of what has been tried in a lot of places, and I'm particularly familiar with the efforts in our capital of New Jersey, Trenton, that has taken this holistic approach of bringing getting the parents involved and engaged. I've looked at this situation in a lot of different countries, and for example, it's very interesting. In Germany, they really have the same problem, especially among immigrant, poor immigrant families with in poor areas there, and it's amazing here. There's a famous movie star there who lives in Munich, where my grandkids live, and she went around looking, and she found out that there were something like 20,000 primary school children in Germany, in Munich, that go to school every morning with no breakfast. And then they started looking at these kids, and they saw some were coming to school in their pajamas. Some were coming to school in the snow in the winter with no shoes on. And they started interviewing that and found here that the kids were saying things like, well, I can't turn the lights on when I get ready for school because my parents will beat me. Teachers who are trying to reach out to talk to families pointed out that they can't even find the parents for up to 20% of their students, that the teachers are spending a lot of time off school hours trying to locate the parents of these kids and are having problems. So I think the bottom line that we have to look at is if we can come up with maybe we can come up with an idea that can be successful on how to take the holistic approach and bring in the families. But if that's going to delay achieving the results, or if we don't see any success examples that hit the large numbers, the majority, and we have to look here right now in the year 2001, there were 4 states in the United States where more than 50% of all public school children were classified as impoverished and therefore qualified for a free or subsidized lunch. 4 states, more than 50% of the kids. By 2011, that number had increased to 17 states. That's 4 times more states. 17 states where 50% or more of the public school children qualified for a free or subsidized lunch. By 2014, that had increased to 22 states. And I think now, I just recently heard that in the United States, we just passed the point that more than 50% of all primary age school children in the United States attending public schools are now qualifying for a free or subsidized lunch. So if we find the solutions, and if anybody can come up with solutions that we believe can be successful in taking different approaches, that's great. But in the meantime, we have actual concrete examples of really impoverished schools and impoverished classes in these neighborhoods where they basically took the kids and helped them be successful. It's interesting to note Finland. Finland started a preschool program they pushed the age all the way down to 6 months of age. And these kids are prepared. So by the time they hit first grade, they don't start first grade until age 7 there. But by the time they hit first grade, those kids are independent learners. They take responsibility for their own education. When they start off here in that preschool, there are 2 students per teacher, student-teacher ratio of 2 to 1. And that number increases slowly up to 3 to 1, 4 to 1. By the time they're 6 years old, I think it's 7 to 1 only, but that's still an incredible number. And when they hit first grade, there's 2 teachers in every classroom, one of which has to have a degree in child psychology. But the main thing that in the early days, you don't hear them talking about it right now because it's politically not too desirable. But in the beginning, they said the number one reason that they implemented that program that way was to reduce the influence of the parents on their children, because they found for those troubled neighborhoods that the influence of the parents on the child's success was negative. So by going and replacing the influence of the parent with the influence of a teacher with the proper education, that resulted in a better result. Okay, any does that, Tala, does that make sense to you?
Yes, yes, thank you. And the fact that these children take responsibilities for their education and for themselves prove that they really want a nice future and they are willing to try.
Yeah, if you can go and give them a belief in themselves that they can succeed on that path, we see success. And that can come here. There's videos that I posted there about this teacher, Tim Vandenberg, I think his name is, from California. He's got 6th graders. They're 12 years old. And they are the worst of the worst here in the state going into 6th grade. And by the time, and they're usually 3 to 4 to 5 years behind going into 6th grade. And by the time they come out of 1 year with him, they are among the better students in the entire state of California. So this is where we see it can happen. And when a child is successful, they begin to see a path for them to a better life through continuing that success. Anyway, last comment here maybe on this introductory aspect. Otherwise, I think we need to get into the discussion a little bit about what we would be doing next. Okay, so I think the first thing here is to make sure we're all on the same page. You've got to believe it can work, that we can do something and it has a chance to work. There's a concrete proposal that that is in the documents there that says, let me back up a step. One of the things that I did when I was going around talking to that, I said to teachers, are you willing to pledge to get 100% of your students to be at 100% grade level at the end of the year? Because if a teacher doesn't believe they can do it and doesn't try to even do it, your chances of success are minimal. So to have a level playing field, I was asking 7th grade math teachers and saying, would you pledge to get 100% of your students to be at 100% grade level in math by the end of the year, the 7th grade? And in my community and communities around where I live, which is middle to upper middle class, the teachers are saying, what do you mean? That's what I do. That's what I do. I get all my students to be at grade level. And as a result, we see the graduates from my community and communities like this. We have 97% of our high school graduates that are going on to 4-year colleges. When I went and talked to teachers in Trenton and Camden and teachers in Missouri and Georgia and Texas, and they said, are you crazy? Yeah, your teachers in those wealthy communities can say that because 90% of their students start the school year grade level ready. But 90% of my students are 3, 4, 5 years behind when they come to me, when they start the year. It's unfair for you to even suggest I be measured by the same yardstick at the end of the year as those teachers who don't have that kind of a challenge. And it's very hard to argue with them here about the fairness of that. But then we asked us and said, well, if we could go and get so that all the students starting your school year, that 90% of them would be grade level ready, would you then be willing to commit to make a pledge to get 100% of your students to be successful? And their response was, oh, sure, if that was the case here, I would have no problem pledging to do that. So we realized we don't have to go and address every grade level at once. If we can get one grade level to achieve so that all the students graduating or moving on from that grade level are 100% grade level ready for the next grade, then the next teacher is saying, I'll pledge. You're giving me students that are 100% ready to succeed. I'll pledge to get them to the next level. So if we can get one grade level to be at that level, if we can focus our efforts and resources on one grade level, that we will be, that the school system should be able, the teachers should be able to continue to raise them to each subsequent level after that. So that means we have to overcome that 2-year gap that those first graders have from disadvantaged communities. So that was a key aspect there. And when I mentioned to you earlier, when we did the studies, we saw that up through 4th grade, that students tend to still respect their teachers and would do what their teachers said. But that starting at 5th grade in such troubled communities, the discipline and the problem in schools became more of a holding pen and almost like reform schools, disciplinary situations for the most part. And they did not have the effort to go and turn around a student that is older like that becomes much more difficult and expensive. And you've got that peer pressure is no longer positive, but it's now somewhat negative. So that was the reason why we suggested here, let's focus on closing the gap at the 4th grade, getting every 4th grade student completing 4th grade to be ready to succeed at 5th grade, so that we can then go to all those 5th grade teachers and say, now you've got all your students are coming to you. They are 5th grade ready and prepared to succeed. Now, will you pledge to get 100% of those students to be grade level ready for 6th grade by the end of your school year? And that became the goal. I'd like to get comments on that philosophical aspect of the suggestion that we're making here for right now, that we're going to try to focus on 4th grade and have those students coming out of 4th grade be 100% ready to succeed going into 5th grade. And the second piece of that is we said, let's focus on math. And there's a reason for that. One, math is a relatively concise vocabulary. It's not like if you're going out and talking about English or the language, and you've got a huge vocabulary that could come into play here. You have terms that have different meanings. In math, things have very specific meanings. So you've got very specific rules. There's not an infinite number of them. There's a certain number of them that, let's say, from kindergarten through 4th grade that you have. And you have also, there's a psychological impact here that math is considered by most kids to be the most difficult subject. If you can have them succeed, exceptionally succeed in math, that boosts their overall confidence. And there's been several studies out there that show when a child's performance in math increases, that tends to raise their performance on all subjects. So this focus on 4th grade and math comments and thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, so I think I definitely agree with starting at the base level, and I guess you said fourth grade, like either whichever grade is fine. Like the lower is the best. I guess I was thinking fifth grade, but even fourth grade is even better because it's a much lower age. But I honestly feel like English is also really important. So we could definitely start at math, but and see how it goes. Because like you said, math has certain rules, and there's a accurate way to measure like the way students are doing. That's not really possible in English. Um, but I still feel like after we start with math, we should also focus on both math and English because I feel like English is a lot more useful in the real world. And like having proper literacy in English and reading, especially reading, because that's where you gain a lot of knowledge. Reading and understanding what people are saying, like the vocabulary, things like that. I think that's also very important in like the real world. That like even if you're not even if you're not gonna become like a mathematician or like an engineer and things like that, you're gonna need like um, you're gonna need English in various aspects of life. That's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, we could. Those are my comments.
I agree 100% with that. If everything else was equal, I would say we should really be starting with communication skills, your basic reading skills. But there's a couple of things here. When we're talking fourth grade math, obviously we're talking foundation skills. We're being able to understand division and things like that. We're not talking about calculus or advanced algebra. So those are our basic skills. The other thing here is as they learn that limited vocabulary, that is also increasing their language skills to that degree, especially as you get into word problems and the like. There's another piece here, and that is that there are tools, the tools that are available out there in the education community to help a person master math are quite sophisticated, and there are quite a number of them. There are not the tools for language skills are not as advanced, perhaps because it is not a finite, it's not as a finite a subject as math is. But I agree that if we can get this, that across the board, students are learning to really master. And when I say master, that means an A- doesn't cut it. So when we go out there and encourage people to be shooting for 100% in math, and we start to achieve that, now we can start looking for the tools and mechanisms to help those students raise their success level of understanding social studies, language, which the two are heavily interrelated, and the sciences and what have you. We just need to be able to demonstrate that this idea, well, those kids maybe aren't just smart enough. We've got to disprove that and demonstrate that these kids can succeed so that people will be willing to invest in the tools and effort on all the other subjects. Once a teacher says, look at these students here, they're now tying the best in what's considered to be the most difficult subject, that will encourage the ability to spread the same kind of assistance to other subjects. And don't forget, we said one of the big goals that we've got is that by the end of this year that we want to do for this program, that those students have become independent learners, that they have become responsible for their own education, regardless of whether it's math or whatever the subject might be, so that they will be going out there seeking out what can help me master my other subjects as well, the same way I've learned to go out there and seek the things that will help me be successful in math. Does that answer?
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah, I agree. Definitely. We have to be their first motivators. Like so that other teachers and their peers give them a chance. And mainly, if once they get like a taste of this higher standard, they feel like they know that they can reach higher levels, and they tend to reach for higher goals more often, and in other aspects as well.
Yep.
So it's not like you'll give, and it's the younger that you start, they'll expect to have that higher standard throughout the rest of their life. So it wouldn't work if you mainly started at like a
Yep.
high school level, or rather than a primary school level.
And keep in mind, when we talk about the age or the grade level here, as I mentioned, the example from Tim Vandenberg out there, he's a 6th grade teacher, and he's managed to be successful at 6th grade. But it's more difficult to be successful at that. First of all, the gap that has to be overcome has grown larger. If the earlier that you can address starting to close the gap, the gap that you have to close is less. The other thing here is that we just know a higher percent of kids become very difficult to teach with the discipline issues and things like that. And some of them even have police records already going into 5th grade. So, but that you're going to get a percentage of kids in 4th grade that's going to apply to, but it's much less. And just as you're finding that percent that you can reach later on, but that percent shrinks with each passing year. Why not 3rd grade? When we went out there and we're looking at that in 3rd grade here, this idea of using independent learning, of getting the students to take responsibility for their own learning. Once you've achieved a certain level of maturity, it's easier to get young people to go and start practicing those independent learning steps. So in 3rd grade here, some students obviously are ready, some students are not. So we found the sweet spot was 4th grade, and talking to a lot of educators seemed to agree with that. And we didn't want to go out there and say, let's go and do this across a whole bunch of grade levels at once, because we would start seeing ourselves putting most of the time either into the troubled cases of 5th grade and beyond, or the not yet ready cases of 3rd grade and below. And that's why we said, let's focus on when we go out there and we want to do a pilot, that we, as a proof of concept, that we can take these troubled schools and have such a major impact, to pick a specific grade to target and be able to say, these students are now ready to 5th grade. And we can go and make that a condition for the schools that want to participate in the pilot, to say the 5th grade teachers all have to pledge that if we can get to the point here that the students coming to them in the next year are grade level ready, they are already pledging in advance. They will make sure those students succeed at the 5th grade level. And they'll have had the opportunity to see what methods worked in the 4th grade to help those students succeed. So the hope is that many of them will copy those methods. And so it will be perpetual for them and for those students through the rest of their school experience. More comments, please, on 4th grade and math.
Yeah, I would just be a bit doubtful of how you would avoid what we could call a curriculum gap, because I understand that I agree with the part that they will grasp and understand which methods work for each student, and then they can use that. But we should also take into account not only that if they are more motivated towards math, they will continue with math and not the others, because that's what they'll enjoy more, because that's what they will understand better. But then we also need to get that as part of human nature. Just imagine, as you were saying, getting the 100%. So you can start level 1 here, you can start level 2 here. If they're in maths, I don't know, if they're here, and then in English or art or whatever, they're here, and then after this initiative they reached enough for level 2, that independent learning they obviously will want to continue with the math because it's easier, because they already have it, while the English, the humanities and the arts, and also the other sciences, there will be a curriculum gap.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if I was clear.
Yeah, I know. Yes, I hear what you're saying, and that is something that definitely students will tend toward the thing they're more successful in. You know, if people are praising them, they're going to get involved in competitions in that. They're going to, you know, they'll be more excited. So maybe the answer is here that if we can succeed in doing that, and we see it's on the way and it's going successful, that we encourage those schools to go and make the 5th grade. Let's pick another subject. Let's pick science or pick social studies or whatever, and say, let's now go here, and we'll encourage the closing of any gaps in those subjects. Although, as I mentioned, I think when you talk independent learning, what are we basically saying? We're saying, okay, students, there's a set of goals. There's a standard test or whatever it is that says you've achieved all the knowledge that you're supposed to achieve in a particular subject by a particular grade. And we're basically challenging them, okay, go find the tools that are going to help you the best. And your teacher is your mentor coach, helping you find the tools and things that are the learning aids that are going to succeed, including here, hey, come to me. You know, if you're having any problems with something, come to me. But every student, we've got to get to the stage where students are working at their own pace, with the tools that work them. We know some students learn better spatial, some students learn better audio, whatever. There's six learning types, if you would, out there. So once students sort of learn that they have that ability to guide their own learning, it's not that difficult, I believe, to go on other subjects and encourage them to apply the same things. And I think here, even within the pilot there, if I'm a social study, well, when you're in 4th grade, typically you've got the same teacher for all subjects across, you know, you just have one teacher. So I would imagine if that teacher is seeing a lot of success using this approach of the students sort of working out their own pace, that they're going to look already to see, oh, how can I apply that same approach to the other subjects that I'm teaching the students. The difference is the maturity of the tools that we can help that teacher by showing them the examples of success with certain tools that are available to them out there right now that can help those students achieve that success. I think there are many in all the other subject areas too. It's just that you don't have a finite limit, let's say, to that. So if somebody's learning long division, you know, there's many ways that you can approach long division, but at the end of the day, it's long division. But I agree. It's not about math. Math is a vehicle for us to achieve an end. And I think we need to think of it that way. But if anybody's got suggestions how we can do that, we just need to be a little careful that we stay focused. If we make too many options, too many choices out there, we run the risk that it all becomes diffuse and we don't achieve the primary goal of having students being reaching that 100% grade level in something where they can sit there and say, I'm good. Look what I've done. Okay, Tali, your hand's still up, or is that from before?
No, I need to ask something. So can you please define more? What do you mean by success? What, you know, how do we see success? What is the point of the success that we are going to? I don't know how to say it. I just need a clarification about the success because I hear it a lot, and I just want to understand.
Okay, in this particular case, there's something here that's got a lot of controversy around, called Common Core here in the United States. It got tied up into a political thing. It actually began that the Republican Party called for accountability and came up and said, let's go and define what a student is supposed to know in each subject by the end of a particular goal year. So that became the goalposts of where it was supposed to be. Somewheres along the way, the Democratic Party endorsed and supported it, and all of a sudden the Republicans said, well, if the Democrats are for it, we can't be for it, so we'll be against it. And so it's gotten a lot of mixture, and it got a bad rep because people started to say, let's use standardized testing as a way, multiple choice standardized testing as a way to say, did somebody achieve those goals or not? And so it got wrapped up into the whole approach of testing things. But the bottom line is that when we say, oh, you've achieved grade level mastery in math or whatever subject it is for a particular grade, we all have to agree what that means. What does that mean? It means you've now mastered 5th grade math. Well, if you can't define what mastery of 5th grade math is, how does anybody know what you're aiming for? So we would, here in the United States, we would take the goals of Common Core and say that's it. But unfortunately, also along the way, Common Core started to get involved in how should you teach those subjects. And of course, that took away the prerogative of teachers. It took away the ability to deal with the fact that some students learn better one way and some students learn better another way. Or how does it deal with the fact that not all students start the year at the same place? That straitjacket got in there and really messed things up. So when we look at success, there are cognitive skills in school and there's societal skills in school. When you're being educated, the goal is you need a rounded education, and you need to learn how to cope with society. That's all working well with others, with the other students, getting along. And there's a lot of aspects of that. But there are some hardcore cognitive skills. Those tend to be the knowledge of math, the knowledge of grammar rules, the knowledge of science, of history. Those are things. Now, most agree today they're not as important as having creative or critical thinking type of skills, a lot of the softer skills. But for our problem is that when it's easier to be picking up some of those other skills along the way. The problem comes when we mix them, when we sort of say, okay, you have to simultaneously learn your group learning skills along with learning math. Because very often we see you put 4 kids on a table and you say, okay, you guys solve the education problems. It's very often that you see there's this one student on the side, they never get to answer anything because somebody else jumps in quicker and answers the question, and they're sort of just a tag along and they don't get that education. So we're really talking, for our purposes right now, we're talking about how do you help those kids get the hard cognitive skills that are really foundational skills for a lot of education things. Plus, we're adding that one factor, which is the independent learning, which is a soft skill, to the cognitive learning objectives. Does that answer your question? Paula?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Others, comments, questions to the goal? Okay, so the next question is, can we succeed? Now, in the materials that were provided, I had the example. Oh, well, Sean, you have your hand raised.
Oh, no, I was just wondering, just to confirm, when you were talking about how they can do, there was, in the US government, they were talking about standards. Are you talking about the controversy behind Common Core state standards? And
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so Common Core just says, you know, that we all agree this is what should be learned in a specific subject by a specific grade level. Okay, the next question is, can we succeed? And I gave the example, and it's only intended as an example. Any teacher that goes out there and says, you know, I found something here, there's a, oh, what's the name of something box. It's something that's used in a lot of your private schools, a Dreambox for math. It's like a commercial Khan Academy, if you would, but a little bit more gamified, and it's got little alligators and stuff like that running around in it and stuff like that aimed at younger kids. So, you know, what tool people use, that's immaterial. What we're doing is saying we want fourth grade teachers to commit they're going to get all their students by the end of the year to have mastered all kindergarten through fourth grade materials. And what we're doing is we're showing them some examples that have been successful in helping kids achieve these levels of success. So Khan Academy is one of those. Now, in talking to a lot of educators out there, first of all, I have to just say, Khan Academy, 90% of teachers that use Khan Academy are not using it as was originally intended. It was originally intended that Khan Academy will handle the teaching, and it is an adaptive learning environment that just goes and says, you start off with 1 + 1 = 1. If you master single digit addition, you can move on to multi-digit addition, or you can move on to single digit subtraction, and then you get into multiplication and so forth and so on. You are never asked to start a learning task that you have not mastered all the prerequisites for. So you're never asked to do something that you don't have all the prerequisite knowledge to be able to achieve. And it does not allow you to go forward if you're following the program. It doesn't allow you to go forward to a task that you have not satisfied all the prerequisites for. That is the way it was originally intended. And the teacher only is watching from the sidelines. So they become that mentor coach. So they see a student who is spending a lot more time in a particular problem area than would be normally expected. They're able to actually see the keystrokes of how a student went through trying to solve the problems that they're currently working on. And therefore they're able to intervene and try to help students over that whatever hump they're on. But the teacher is out of the teaching business. They're not in the teaching business. So that was the way it was originally intended. And for the student, it was intended for the student. You don't go and watch the videos and then go and do the exercises. It was originally intended here. You completed some round of exercises. We now present you with the next more complicated round of problems there, and you start. And if you run into problems, then you can ask for a hint. And maybe that hint's going to cause you to think, and therefore you're able to go now and solve the problems that you're working on. But if not, you can ask for another hint, and you can keep asking for hints. But at some point you might say, I still don't get it. And at that point you can say, oh, show me a video. Let's look at a tutorial. And when you make that point to decide you want a hint or you want to watch a tutorial how to do it, that the student makes that decision. And if after watching, if you ask for some hints, you watch the tutorial, and if you're still stuck, ask the student sitting next to you, or ask the teacher, or go and chat with your friend sitting halfway around the world and say, gee, yeah, I'm stuck on this. Do you know how to do this? So in other words, we're teaching the student to take the initiative to figure it out, how they're going to get themselves unstuck. And even to the point when we go and advise teachers, we would advise teachers, if the student you see the students having trouble, you see the students stuck, but you see the student did not ask for a hint, or they did not watch a tutorial. You don't go and say, oh, this is how you do long division. This is how you solve that problem. But instead, what you're doing is asking the student here, Did you ask for a hint? Did you watch a video? Did you ask somebody else how maybe to do that? So in other words, the teacher's main teaching job is to teach the student how to be an independent learner, not to teach the student necessarily how to do long division. So that's a key aspect that we're talking about on how we would expect tools like Khan Academy to be used. That's a little bit radical change, and some of you may have been exposed to Khan Academy and maybe you used it that way, maybe you didn't. I'd like to get any comments or questions about that philosophy, that the teacher is not there to help the student learn how to do long division. That teacher is there to help the student learn to be an independent learner, to figure out themselves how to do long division. And not only that, but by going and saying, gee, did you watch a video? Did you ask for a hint? Did you ask somebody else? You're helping that student learn, gee, the next time I get stuck, oh, that's what I need to do to get myself unstuck. So we're trying to go and make sure that, you know, people get stuck in life. And the important thing is people have confidence that, but I know how to get myself unstuck. So to that approach here, comments and thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of the things that we've been doing this so far in this meeting have been contemplative. And I think that we should definitely keep focusing on like the main aspects, and maybe it would help to even like write some of the important concepts down like in our own way, so that we can reassure our understanding of what you're talking about, Bill. And also I think either this meeting or in the next meeting we have for this committee, we should have a group discussion with everyone so that we can start bouncing off ideas of what we could, what needs to be done and what we can start off doing to get to that final goal. So I guess one idea that I had just now was sort of like similar to the Dare to Be Great competition. We would have a sort of program, not a competition, but like a national or maybe state level program for those, especially for those schools that have challenges, and get or put together a program that's motivational and inspiring to the students to have them like learn certain subjects. So we would like not only teach them math or English or whatever we're teaching, but set up a interesting and child like or like a program that would be interesting to them, and have them like understand why learning and having independent learning is important. So they have like some self motivation. It's not like other people are telling them you need to get A's, you need to achieve the mastery. They want to get that for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to come back to this and remind me if I don't come back to this here in just a minute, because I think when we talk about specifically, how do we think we can actually put this into effect? How do we think we can actually get the educators, the education system doing this? I'm going to jump to that quickly because I'm watching time is going by here, and I realize it's tough for a number of you to stick over the extended time. What I'd like to do is we were addressing the question here: do we believe the approach can work? And I'm going to get into some very specific comments there that I'll ask you to. Do you believe the approach will work? And then I want to address here the outline that we put forth as to how we can kick something off in the next 3 to 4 months, and your beliefs and confidence level that can work. Because we can have the greatest idea in the world, but if nobody does anything about it, what good is it? But I would like, before sticking there, because the main piece here is, are we all agreeing the same thoughts? So this thought here of independent learning, of promoting independent learning and getting the students so by the time they go into 5th grade, they are used to driving their own education process, at least in math. So that's that idea that trying to get the teachers, do not be out there trying to teach math. Be out there teaching how to be an independent learner. If I could just get comments on that particular point, and then we'll go on to the concrete measure here, or the concrete idea of how we can get this started.
I completely agree with you about the teachers going towards independent learning rather than teaching this subject. So I feel like the teacher should focus more on inspiring students' motivation towards learning, and then coaching the students to set goals and develop a plan for the learning that they want to achieve, and then teach students to self-accept, like, like be like, oh, where's my problem, and like, how could I solve that problem, like, to self-assess themselves. I think it's pretty important too.
Okay. Because that takes us to the next step on do we believe it can work, and that is looking at Khan Academy. For example, if a student completed every single learning goal in math, from the 1 + 1 = 2, all the way up through everything you're supposed to know at the end of 4th grade. Keep in mind, they cannot move on to the next learning step until they've 100% mastered the previous one. Then they've demonstrated that mastery. And there's hundreds of steps between that 1 + 1 = 2 to the end of 4th grade. The first question is, if a student completes every single one of those to the end of what they're supposed to know at 4th grade, with success, they've demonstrated success in every single step along the way, can we say that they have fully mastered all of the K through 4 learning goals? And so far, everybody I've talked to, the teachers, from the perspective of learning goals with regards to math. And the answer that I've heard from everybody is yes. That if they have successfully completed all those exercises, and keep in mind, Khan Academy originally was intended, you had to get 10 answers in a row straight without making a single mistake to be able to go on to the next item. And you don't get the same question twice, right? It generates literally billions of unique questions. And if you haven't seen my website there, I have a website where I tore Khan Academy apart and how it works internally. And we developed a translation tool to be able to allow it to be translated into any language. So that first question is, do we believe if a student completes all those materials that they are now, we can say they are a straight A in math student, regardless of what they did in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. That's where they are at the end of 4th grade. Yes.
Okay, I think that we could rank them as their school or education type of rate, but we want to see if these students wants to continue learning and did really how do I say this, like, are they willing to continue? We don't want them to just succeed in this part and of the way, because in my opinion, it's a long-term way, and we need to focus on how they will think for the future. We don't want them just to I don't know how to explain it. I have nothing to say more. I don't know if you get the point.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like the independent learning perspective, and does that motivation stick? Keep in mind, we're right now, we got to have a laser focus on something here, because You know, we can't necessarily solve everything, but what we're saying is that by the end of fourth grade, they have 100% mastery of everything. They could take any test anybody wanted to give them on materials that of anything to do with math between kindergarten and fourth grade, and they would get a straight A. That is sort of the expectation of where they're at. And the second thing here is, but that's something you really can't test. Have they really mastered the idea of becoming an independent learner? I would venture to say that they're going to have a hard time succeeding in achieving the math goals if they've not become an independent learner, because they're driving their own process. You're going to have a class, a teacher's going to have a class where there's probably no two students within that class that are learning the same thing at the same time, because some students grasp something quicker, some students are tired one day, some students have maybe didn't have breakfast that day. There's a whole bunch of reasons why on any given day, some students move faster than other students. And it doesn't make any difference as long as every student is building a solid foundation, that the next learning goal is built on a solid knowledge and expertise in the previous goal. So that's step one. Do we believe that if you complete all the learning goals that you've achieved 100% of fourth grade mastery of math? The second thing is, do you believe that the average student at 1 hour a day can achieve the 100% mastery by the end of 1 year? That, in other words, that you can complete proving your mastery of everything from kindergarten through the end of fourth grade in a year, one school year, at the rate of 1 hour a day. And if you go on that assumption here that you're not going to go and watch every video, you know, it's kind of hard to take a fourth grader that's doing fairly good and saying, now I want you to watch this video on how you do single and digit addition. Like I said, I know that. So, you know, by the time a child reaches fourth grade, some children, almost all children, have some gaps and some holes in their knowledge, but they know a fair amount. The problem is all the students have different holes. And so as they're going through that learning process, if you're just taking the exercises here, all the very simple ones, you're just knocking those out. You go to the next one, you knock that out, you knock that out, you knock that out. Eventually you hit one and you say, I don't really remember. How did that work now? And so that one you spend some more time on. And then you continue, then you continue on until you find the next item you get a little bit stuck on. So that's the reason why we believe that the majority of the students, and again, this is why fourth grade as opposed to sixth grade is a little better, because there's just not as much knowledge between first grade or kindergarten and fourth grade, that it's possible that students should be able to complete all the kindergarten through fourth grade within one school year. And that's what enables us to get all these kids to be A students by the end of fourth grade. So two things. One, if you succeeded at all the hundreds of learning steps between kindergarten and fourth grade, and that in 1 hour a day, you can complete all that material in one school year. The question is, do you believe those two items? So thoughts on that?
I think so on both. On the second question, I would just be careful so as not to try to say, okay, the first 3 years of school are not needed. So if you want, you can do the 3 of them just in 1 year. And then for the first question, one of the things that I like the most about Khan Academy is that you can decrease in level. So if you're lucky and you're able to get those 10 questions right and go up on level, that doesn't mean you're going to stay in that level. You can still go down. And I think that's when I remember when we were starting when we were starting to present all these initiatives, you spoke of sometimes having 90% people just think, okay, I just got one thing wrong. That's okay. It's just one thing. But when you go to the next level, that thing is gonna make you make 2 mistakes, and then 3 mistakes, and then it just accumulates. And that's one of the best things about Khan Academy, because you can always go up but down as well. And then for the second question, it will be really just that point of being careful so as not to say you don't need those first 3 years, you're able to do everything in just one. I think it's possible to do the one, but just be careful as not to give that perspective.
Actually, here it's dependent on the fact that you have achieved a certain degree of learning through those first 3 years that makes it possible to do it in 1 year. So because of the fact you're able to breeze through the parts that you did get, you only have to focus on the holes that you've got in your learning in those out of those first 3 years. So you're patching up, if you would, the weaknesses in your foundation, so that now as you continue on through the 4th grade, to catch up, if you would. Regarding this going back, one of the suggestions here that we have for platforms like Khan Academy is that it should be adaptive. So in other words, when you get there and you get stuck on a particular problem, somebody should be analyzing it. So we know that to do long division, you've got to have mastered subtraction and multiplication. These are 2 prerequisites for doing long division. As you're going through that, to be able to see, is the problem you're having because of a weakness in multiplication, or is it due to a weakness in subtraction, so that that it adapts and it says, okay, I have to put you back. I have to take you back a step. Or if I see you're making too many mistakes and you keep trying, and after your 6th try, you still can't get through 10 straight in a row, that something comes in there and does an analysis. Like when you first start off, it goes and it tries to judge where you're at in the learning of your previous learning, so it can sort of put you at the appropriate level, so that when you get stuck on a particular type of problem, it should go back and give you a little mini test, so that it can try to determine where is the weakness, where did you forget something that you previously had mastered, or where did you maybe not master it as well as people thought, so it can loop you back to review that particular area of weakness and then move you forward. So that's to that. But does anybody want to say anything more about these 2 assumptions? One is, if you complete all the learning steps, you will have fully mastered your grade level through your grade level. And 2, that in an hour a day, you can complete all those materials through the end of your grade level. Okay, so if that's the case, if we believe those 2, we've only got one challenge. The one challenge is to get the students all to put in that 1 hour a day, right? That becomes our challenge. How do we get you? Now we talk about motivation and whatnot, but it's motivation. It's not motivation, general motivation. It's very specific motivation. Put in that hour a day. And because we have the ability of the teacher to be able to watch what the students are doing. Now, it's an 80-20 rule. Probably 80% of the students, they're just marching through, polishing off the ones they didn't know, succeeding and closing the gaps on the ones that they had not been aware of, and patching up those gaps. And they're just going along at full speed and everything is working great. But what this lets them do is identify the ones that are not, the ones that are getting stuck at a greater rate of time or for a longer period of time, so that now that teacher can focus on working on the basis of management by exception. They can now focus all their time on those students that need the help the most. In addition to that, one of the things we're proposing is for Rotary to get engaged and to go and find personal coaches, if you would, that will also work with the teacher so that every student has somebody who's watching their progress, so that we don't have long gaps before somebody intervenes. We don't want to leave a student stuck too long. You also don't want a problem if of a student being inactive too long, right? The student says, oh, I'm going to put in an hour a day. And all of a sudden you see here, because you're able to watch, you see, oh, wait a minute, they haven't put in any time in the last 2 days. So that you're able to go and intervene and remind them of that and say, you as a student, you pledged you were going to put that hour a day in here, but you didn't. And maybe the student says, I was sick, I'm sorry. Or my little sister got sick and I had to go and help out with this or that. So I couldn't do it, or whatever. But the idea is it's not, the student's not left on their own. Somebody is watching, looking for the exceptions that where an intervention would be warranted. As long as all those coaches and teachers all realize the goal is here, the help is to help the student figure out how to get themselves unstuck, and not to go and just show the student how to solve a particular kind of problem. What are your thoughts on saying that is the gist of our project, is to say, what are our measures for how we're going to keep the students putting in that intensive, motivated hour a day, and do that for an entire school year? Now, do you all feel, oh, sure, we can do that?
I'm sure there'll be some roadblocks in getting people to do that for 1 hour a day.
Yeah, but that becomes the challenge for us, to find ways to facilitate, to try to help the students put in that hour a day. And if they go through a couple of days here for one reason or other, they couldn't put it up, that we sort of keep track of, you owe us 2 extra hours somewhere. So maybe you need to put an hour and a half a day in for a few days to make up for that.
I think that when we talk about the motivation, it's not only the student, but also teachers' motivation, parents' motivation, the school's motivation as well, whether they just want to get reputation or if they actually care for the students doing well. And it also has all the social obstacles that you were talking about of does the cultural or the country present the role of education as an important one to their children, or do their parents show that education has an important role? I think that will be one of the major challenges. But if we are able to put that motivation to all the actors and the factors, and we are able to show them the importance of education and what they can achieve, I don't know, maybe putting them talking to professionals and just showing what they can achieve, I think it's more than possible. 1 hour is more than possible. Yeah.
Let me paint a scenario here of one of the things as we talked about how we might do this. First is to get some hype going, some kind of excitement there. And I don't remember who it was. I think Siam, it may have been you, about this idea of the societal impact or the surrounding impact. One of the things we've been talking about here is to make something very exclusive, where we invite, out of the 1,000 schools, if we just took here Northern New Jersey or New Jersey, we have more than 1,000 elementary schools, that we make something very exclusive that if you're one of the bottom 200 schools, let's say, that 10 schools can qualify to become part of this program that's going to get high profile and could earn big honors for the school and for the community and so forth and so on. And we get mayors competing to try to do that. And we say, look, if you want to get involved, your best chances are if you can get every teacher, every 4th grade teacher to pledge that they are going to buy in 100% to making this successful. The principal has to buy in, the school board has to buy in, the PTA has to buy in. all the students that are going to be in the 4th grade next year, they've all got to sign pledges saying, I'm going to do this, as well as their parents have to all sign that they're going to really support this. And granted here, you're never going to get 100%, but the schools that get 100, the largest percent of that community, that global community, saying we are going to make this success and we're going to be able to do that better than other schools. And that's why you should pick our school to be part of this program. And then somehow tie that in addition, it will be sort of a competition among those 10 schools. If you're seeking 10 schools to be part of the pilot, if we did this on the basis of, let's say, Northern New Jersey, those 10 schools, and you get the local Rotary clubs here going and saying, we're going to support our local schools. So that we can try to go and get a number of schools, at least 10, to compete for the privilege to be in a program like that. And then even set up the encouragement that they're going to organize community rallies and stuff like this to go and get their kids to go and say, come on, we gotta beat out the other. We need a higher percentage of our 4th grade. At the end of the 4th grade, the competition is who's got the greatest percentage of their 4th graders that are at 100% grade level at the end of the school year. And so by creating a competitive effect to be able to even have the right to participate, but then above that, making it a competition here so that all during the year. And then on top of that here is to try to arrange professional basketball, football players, whatever, mayors, to at the beginning of the school year to depend on go into every 4th grade class in the participating schools, say, come on, yeah, you can do this. We're gonna win. You're a team. We can make this happen, and get them fired up. Get every kid to go and pledge. I'm gonna put in my hour a day. I'm gonna achieve 100% of this. And here's my handprint on my piece of paper on the wall. And every morning they come into class, they all stand and put their hand on their palm print on there and recite here, we're the greatest, we're gonna win, we're the best, so that they're reminded every single day of their pledge to put in the time and the effort. And then you've got their coaches from Rotary here, and don't only have to be Rotarian. It gives Rotary the opportunity to reach out to all kinds of people in the community that would like to volunteer to be a coach. Have to be vetted, obviously, working with kids, but you gotta get people that are really engaged, that are just going rah, 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 you can do it, you can do it. And they're all trained as to say, you're not there to teach them long division. You're there to go and make sure that they know how to get themselves unstuck anytime they get themselves stuck. And that you're there to go and keep encouraging them to make sure they're putting in that hour a day on their effort and reminding them of their own pledge. And perhaps if somebody is, you got some issues there with motivation or whatnot, perhaps you arrange for them to get a call from some celebrity. So that Rotary person arranges to them, or you do something that raises their image among their peers. So they sort of feel now, now I got something I have to live up to. So we have to look to pull all the psychological stops and the psychological games on that to really keep everything going. And when we look here and say, okay, we want to have a mentor coach for every single student, then we also have to go and say, and we want to have here a coach to the coaches. So that if a coach, these people say, yeah, I'll be a mentor coach. And if we see that their students are having trouble, and we see that the mentor coach has not been intervening there, that we've got somebody else that's watching the performance of the mentor coaches who can intervene on the mentor coach, and perhaps if we have to, can replace a mentor coach that's not getting the job done. So that is a little bit the one approach of the philosophy of recruiting 10 schools Because if we had 10 schools and we can show we took 10 schools that are in the bottom 10% of the state, and in 1 year, we moved them to be up in the top 20% of the state, and at least for that grade level that we're working with, everybody is going to be shaking their heads to say, how did you do that? Because I've been tracking Camden now for 10 years, and 10 years where I can show you reports on the Philadelphia TV stations where they interviewed them. Now we're going to do it. Now the world's better. We got the computers. We got the best computers. We got these special teachers that have come here and this and that, and nothing changed. Nothing changed in the results. So if we manage to pull that off, can you imagine how many schools around the country are going to, how did you do that? How do you do that? Can we do that? And then you turn around and you get hundreds of schools or thousands of schools that say, let's copy that. That worked. Let's copy that. And finally, you get to the point here when all of a sudden schools that are taking that approach are being successful. You're going to start to have people looking at the school boards and the principals and others of the schools that are not having the success and start to say, but wait a minute, all these other schools are having success. You're not. Maybe you aren't the right people for this job. And I don't have a single problem for going out and saying, if there's a path that demonstrates success and people for whatever reason are not willing to give their students those same opportunities, they don't belong in a job. And I don't have any problem hounding them out of the jobs. Anyway, that's the one strategy. There's another strategy that's been brought up that we have some people that have some connections into the mayor's office in New York. And instead of going out and saying, let's get 10 schools in New Jersey, let's do that as a way of the competition. What would happen if the mayor of New York were to hold a big press conference and announce that we hereby challenge the mayor of, I don't know, Los Angeles, whatever, that we can get a higher percent of our fourth graders to be at 100% grade level than you can, because our kids are smarter or whatever. And they go out there and they maybe challenges Detroit and a bunch of other cities out there in school districts. And then you wrap up the press conference with a bunch of fourth graders coming onto the stage and going, nah, 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 we're better than you are. But you basically create a situation here where the city that doesn't pick up on that challenge is looking like wimps. So that's the other approach. And we've got people in Baltimore and people in Detroit that have suggested that they have connections into the mayors of those cities. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in New York. It could be the mayor of Detroit challenging the mayor of Baltimore or whatever. And there's a possibility to pick up those kind of people as some of those mayors as co-conspirators to say, this is a way we can motivate our students by going and saying, you got to uphold this, the honor of our cities at stake. And you are the ones, you've got to hold up the honor of our cities as a way to get a significant percentage of schools and teachers engaged in such a program like that. So these are two approaches that are one of the papers that out there for you to read. Any thoughts or comments on that?
So you're proposing to create like a sort of, starting from New York or New Jersey, creating like a call for like all the schools in that state to attempt to bring
Not
their
the
fourth
state.
grade?
The state's a little bit tough, to go, but
For
a
the city.
So
City.
you could take a city here. You got in a city like New York, you've got a certain percentage of schools that are highly successful, and they sort of have these semi-private public schools, so that's one approach. The main thing that we're looking to do is to get a certain number of schools on board to say, let's do this, and to get a certain amount of media attention so that the media is sitting there looking over the shoulders and, wow, look at these kids, they're all churning away here and they're making stuff happen and this. So we build up these kids that they're feeling like heroes. They're feeling like, I'm the champion here for my city. we're gonna show them. Oh, we don't want to allow that other city to beat us. Or if you're one of those 10 schools that are participating, they all fought for the honor to be one of those 10 schools to begin with, and now they're fighting for the honor to be in the top 2 or 3 out of those 10 schools that did get selected. So we try to go, and again, it's all psychological games, but those psychological games become very important for keeping people fired up and putting that hour in. If I listen to Tim Vandenberg, he talks about some of his students there. They managed to get not only through their grade level, they're 2 years ahead by the end of that school year because they just kept going. They were putting in that hour a day, and they're going and moving ahead like that. And just because they finished all the 6th grade material didn't mean they were going to stop. They just kept going. So that's sort of the gist of what we're talking about right now. We've talked about, could it work? Of pieces there that are in place. We've just got to figure out how do we get them to put that intensive hour a day in, and how do we get the teachers and get some parties there that are making sure that the students are picking up those independent learning skills and motivation there. And if we can just keep them going like that, we believe that this will achieve a level of success that has really not been seen before. Any other cons? Because that's basically, in a nutshell, all the pieces. The question is, do we believe that we can go out there either using the approach of finding a couple of mayors who want to go and put the prestige of their city on the line as a way to rally the people that they're a good mayor. Wow, look at that. They got this mayor is really getting his education system fired up here by doing this, or by going out there and approaching our the 200-300 schools that are in that bottom 20% and going and creating an attractive proposition for them to want to compete to be one of the 10 schools that gets selected to have this shot to move up into the top 20%. If you're a school that's been in the bottom 10 to 20% for as long as anybody can remember, that might be a pretty big incentive to you to say, wow, what's that going to do to my reputation here as the leader of this school or as the superintendent of schools? If I manage to get one of my schools to jump from the bottom 10% to the bottom 20, the top 20% in a year, wow, if I could do that, that's going to make me be a hero. And it's going to really reinforce my career. So we got to play the same psychological games we're talking about with the kids, with the school officials and others there, because school officials are the most risk-averse people on the planet. You know, most school officials there, they just don't want any problem. So as long as I'm not worse than my predecessor was, and my school performance goes down, I'm more afraid of my school performance going down a little bit than I am here desirous that my school performance goes up. Unfortunately, that tends to be. And as long as I'm doing what everybody else has done for the last 100 years, people can't say, I guess, you know, you did wrong. But if I go out there and try to do something different and new and it fails, wow, then I'm in deep, deep trouble. So we have to figure out ways to overcome all those kind of thinking. So that idea of going out there and creating a competition to try to get our 10 schools between now and May, we have time to line up 10 schools that would participate in the following school year. So what are your thoughts to that?
I actually have one question, because even if we're going for the bottom schools, they always have, even those that are at the bottom, they have better students and not as that good grades. So you would focus more on those worst students, giving them an extra support. So with that extra support, I assume that they would eventually improve their performance and stop being among the worst students. Would that extra support be just taken away from them?
No. I think the idea here is we're looking at the school that is in the last, in the bottom 5%, and we want to get all the students to be at the top. Because what happens is you're 100% right. There's 10% of students that will succeed regardless of how bad the school is. You're always going to have that that small percent that's going to succeed. We are saying here, let's focus to get the teachers and everybody focus on the students having the most trouble. Keep raising that. Because if you don't raise that, the teacher's spending more of their time focusing on the level of where the majority of the class is at. And that's holding back your best students. So what you want to do is by going and getting the bottom going up, and by moving to the idea that you're not holding classes now for the class as a group. Every student's going forward at their individual pace, so that we don't worry about who got sick on this day and who wasn't able to concentrate on that day, and so forth. As long as each one is moving forward, if somebody got sick for a week, 2 weeks, that's okay. They pick up where they left off. You know, so they don't suffer from the fact that other students in the class have moved on. But we would hopefully have that concept of mentor coaches working here for the students, that would continue on. And as I said, that the teachers in the subsequent years observing what's going on here would pick up that practice, and we would find ways to encourage that. And just because we're not, you know, we're sort of saying for the teacher, focus on the ones having the most trouble. This is just, you've got X amount of time resource that teacher has. So if the teacher is spending a certain amount of time with students that don't need the help, which right now, when you're in a group and somebody says, okay, here's how we do exercise 1, and now everybody go and do it yourself, and the teacher's walking around the room looking over the shoulders to see who's doing well and who's not doing well. They're spending a significant part of their time looking over the shoulder of students that don't need the help. If every student, if there was some kind of a colored light bulb over the head of every student, and it would be green for students that don't need help and red for students that need help, that would let the teacher make a beeline to the ones that need the help the most, and the whole class would benefit the most. So, but as a group, as a committee here, as you guys all get in deeper and deeper here to what we're looking to do, those kinds of questions you want to be asking yourself on a continual basis, and you want to be looking to say, making sure, are there unintended consequences? We have to watch out for unintended consequences of what we're doing. Again, we don't want them to go and say, oh, I'm going to put all my effort into this math competition, and the heck with all my other subjects over there, right? So, you know, we have to perhaps maybe even try to help that teacher with those other subjects as we talked about, but keeping for this year that primary focus on, because we're trying to help those students develop a success mindset, and we're trying to create an example so that the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of other schools that are low performing schools have an example to follow, to try to replicate in subsequent years. Okay, we're hitting here I don't think we can, you know, go. We should have ended here about 50 minutes ago, probably. And I really thank you guys for sticking with this. What is your confidence level here? Are we going to be able to do this?
I'm pretty positive in us. I think we'll be able to do this.
Absolutely.
Okay. So really, I look at it here, those of you here, I want this to become your project. And we start off in the States with this example, but Leah, I know in throughout Europe, you have exactly this same situation, you know, especially if you look at France, if you look at Germany, Germany here has almost 40% of the student population in Germany is a failure. I've talked to a lot of headmasters of the sort of the third category of elementary schools there, you know, they said, we don't know what to do anymore. We're just warehousing these kids. And then the kids reach a certain age and they just push them out to the next level of school, and then they get pushed out of school altogether. And this is why your industry in Germany is saying, we need to relax the immigration laws to be able to get more immigrants, young immigrants coming to Germany, because we would rather have an immigrant coming from another country than having anybody from the bottom 40% of the Germans working for us, because the bottom 40% of the Germans have developed a bad mindset towards work, and they don't have the skills and they don't have the motivation because they never learned the motivation. So I really feel those of you, if you really get into this and you guys drive this, along the way, you're going to be starting to talk with some very senior people from places like the Gates Foundation and other organizations like that. And you're going to be picking up contacts, and you're going to be building your reputations. And I can pretty much assure you, if you succeed at pulling something like this off, I don't know what your plans are right now for the rest of your life, but I would almost guarantee you, if you succeed in pulling this off, your life is probably going to end up taking a different path than you've imagined until now. Because you're going to see doors being opened to you. You know that 22-year young girl, the poet who spoke at the Biden inauguration? I can guarantee you whatever she thought she was going to be doing for the next 5 years has totally changed in just the last week. And we're talking about here because there's been so much media attention to the failure of education in the US, that if you guys manage to demonstrate that it can be different, you're going to be out there sitting there being interviewed by the press right and left. You're going to be getting all kinds of foundations wanting and education experts wanting to talk, wanting to have you speak at their events. So, you know, whenever you do something that's a success in what is very hard, where people have failed over and over in the past, and you succeed in doing something that you thought was impossible or others thought was impossible, the definition of the word impossible for you and the rest of your life will have changed forever. That's what Dare to Be Great is all about. So last comments, 1 minute more. Last comments.
So I think what you wrote in the chat before was the goal after this meeting is to begin formulating a formal proposal.
Yeah. To take all the stuff we've talked about, because there's documents out there that describe all this, but I want to make sure you guys collectively all agree to a plan. So just like we're doing in the international debate competition, I'm going to create a document for you guys as a shared document. I want you to summarize your understanding of this whole ball of wax that we talked about, and I'll put some starter outline topics there. And then in parallel to that, to start putting together the task list, all the stuff that has to be done now over these next few months, if you want to be able to be successful in kicking this off here in the fall. And a couple of things here, and Sean's aware of this, is I'm going to be trying to reach out to the governor and the Secretary of Education here in New Jersey, and perhaps the head of the New Jersey Education Association, the teachers union, to even though it's really the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, that has most of the inner city teachers. So between those groups, to try to go and get some allies who love this idea that, you know, what kind of a feather in the cap would that be for a governor of New Jersey to be able to say New Jersey was the first one. They did a project in New Jersey that demonstrated we can close the education gap, which has been the holy grail for the last 50 years. That would be a huge feather. So if we can get them to believe this can work, we could get some very powerful allies there. So we'll be reaching out in that, and I'll be following up with some people about the possibility with the mayors of New York, Baltimore, and Detroit as well. So, but two things for you guys here, and we, just like in the other one, let's agree. Intensive, next 4 days. Can you guys complete that document? You, and we'll put, you know, push for the rest of the committee there that wasn't able to stick with us here to try to complete a document. That would be a comprehensive, probably be about a 20-page document here of all the details of how you envision this in the school 2021, 2022 school year could work. Okay. So I would say that's it. I thank you guys here for your attention. And one of the things is you do all this writing and you get to know one another here is at some point here, I want you guys to build your leadership structure in this committee. And so that that I could get hit by a bus tomorrow and I don't have to worry about all this stopping. Not that I intend to go out and stand in front of a bus, but, and especially with COVID, I don't go out anyway. Okay, so again, thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to see this evolve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.